Alrighty, chapter 5. Now we are only doing 2 sections in chapter 5, and then we will review for the final and have our final exam. So the first one is consumer and producer surplus. We are not going to do, sorry, let me get everything pulled up here. We are not going to do price floors, price ceilings, and dead weight loss. We are just going to focus on consumer and producer surplus. And there should be a question in here that will be almost identical to the question that is on your quiz. Of course, the numbers will be different. Okay, so d of x is your demand function. Okay, now remember that d of x, we have a price and a quantity. So if we're looking at the demand function, okay, let's look at this demand curve. The lower the price, the more consumers demand. So the demand function goes down as we go along. Okay, the idea of consumer surplus is that at, let's say, this price, I'm sorry, this quantity, I was willing to pay whatever this price is. At this quantity, I was willing to pay this price. Okay, but this gray box down here actually represents the quantity sold and the price that they were all sold at. Okay, so this is what we actually paid as consumers. Okay, this brownish area up above it is what represents what we were willing to pay, but we didn't have to. In other words, that's money that we now get to spend somewhere else. Okay, I think your book still describes it as excess enjoyment. Not quite sure what that is, but in order to figure out the consumer surplus, remember that's just this brown area up here. What we're going to do is take the antiderivative from 0 to Q, our quantity that we are selling, of the demand function. Okay, now remember, if I do that, that will give me all of this area down here. Okay, the surplus isn't all of that area though, it's just that brown section. So we need to subtract out this rectangle below. That is where this Q times P. The quantity is the width of my rectangle, the price is the height of my rectangle, so I'm subtracting out the rectangle that represents what we actually paid. Okay, so I get antiderivative of the demand function from 0 to the quantity sold, and I subtract out the amount that represents what we as consumers actually paid. Okay, so here is one example for consumer surplus. We have a quantity of 3. Now I'm going to go ahead and multiply this out. The demand function they gave us was d of x equals x minus 5 quantity squared. And remember, you have to FOIL that out. So it's minus 10x plus 25. Okay, and the quantity demanded is 3. Okay, now what they've done on this line is went ahead and plugged 3 into the demand function to find the price. Okay, they plugged the quantity in and got out the price. So my Q, my quantity is 3, and my price is $4. Okay, so we're going to take the antiderivative from 0 to 3. They gave us the quantity in this example as 3. The demand function, x squared minus 10x plus 25 dx minus, and from that we're going to have to subtract this rectangle, Q times T. Okay, we want to keep these two separate though. Okay, I want to get a number for this half, and then I'll subtract the 12 from it at the end. So we need to go ahead and take the antiderivative here. So we have x cubed over 3 minus 10x squared over 2 plus 25x, evaluated 0 and 3, and we're going to subtract 12 from that. So this is x cubed over 3 minus 5x squared plus 25x. Again, still needs evaluated at 0 and 3. And from that, we're going to subtract 12. So let's see. Again, I'm going to just throw this into my calculator and let it do the work. So we have x cubed minus 5x squared plus 25x. Okay, and when we evaluate that at 3, we get 57. When we evaluate it at 0, we get 0. So on that end, we have 57 minus 0. So my area under the curve is 57. I'm going to subtract the rectangle that represents what we paid, which is $12. Okay, so 57 minus 12 leaves me with $45. That is my consumer's surplus. Okay, now we can do the same thing on the producer side. As producers, the higher the price goes, the more units we are willing to sell. So the demand is low when the price is low. I'm sorry, we are willing to sell fewer units when the price is low. And as the price goes up, we are willing to sell more and more units. Okay, so for producer surplus is this green box here, or that green triangle shape. Okay, so what this says is, here is my supply curve. Okay, so as a supplier, I was willing at this quantity to take this price, at this quantity to take this price. Okay, this line represents what I was willing to take. This box represents what I actually got. So in this case, the box that represents what we paid for the goods, or as from the producer side, what we brought in for the goods is larger than the supply curve. So we start with that rectangle, and then we're going to subtract out this section down here. Remember, this is the section that represents what we were willing to take, but we actually got more than that. Okay, so we're going to take the rectangle that comes first. Please write a note about that to yourself. The rectangle has to come first. And from that, we are going to subtract the antiderivative of the supply function from 0 to q. Okay, so let's see if we can do an example real quick. All right, so again, we have a quantity of 3. We have this as our supply function. So our producer surplus. Now, first thing is we have our quantity, which is 3. We need our price. So in order to get the price, we put the quantity into the supply function, and we get that the price is $15. Okay, we need that to make our rectangle. So the rectangle comes first. So we have 3 times 15 minus, we're subtracting the antiderivative of the supply function from this. 0 to 3, x squared plus x plus 3 dx. Okay, so we have 45. Now again, we're going to drag this along. We want to get a number for this section over here and then subtract that number from 45. So our antiderivative is x cubed over 3 plus x squared over 2 plus 3x. And we want to evaluate that at 0 and 3. So again, I'm going to throw that part into my calculator. Okay, so we have x cubed divided by 3 plus x squared divided by 2 plus 3x. And if we evaluate that at 3, we get 2250. And if we evaluate that at 0, we get 0. So we have 45 minus 2250, which means our producer surplus is $22.50. Okay. All right. Now, in the last two examples, they just kind of gave you some quantity, and there was no logic to why they chose that quantity. It was just given to you. A more logical way for us to find the quantity, and the way you'll see me present this kind of problem to you, is that we would find the quantity by finding the equilibrium point between the supply and demand curves. So, in order to find the equilibrium point, we are going to set the two functions equal to each other. Let me write out our d of x again. Multiply it out, so it's x squared minus 10x plus 25. Okay, so to find the equilibrium point, set functions equal. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So part A is x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals x squared plus x plus 3. Okay, let's go ahead and subtract x squared from both sides. I want to move it over to one side if I can. Okay, and it subtracts off of both sides. So we have negative 10x plus 25 equals x plus 3. All right, so let's go ahead and subtract 3. And we'll add 10x. So we get 22 equals 11x, which means x equals 2. So we have that for our equilibrium point, our quantity is 2. We still need our price. Okay, and now we get the price by plugging our quantity into either one of these functions. I like to go with this one because the math is really simple. 2 minus 5 is negative 3, and negative 3 squared is 9. So my price is $9. Okay, so now I have my Q and my P. Part B is to find the consumer surplus. So we're going to take the, oh dear, let me fix that. Okay. We are going to take the antiderivative from 0 to the quantity 2 of x squared minus 10x plus 25. And from that, we are going to subtract 2 times 9. Okay, so we need to take the antiderivative. So we get x cubed over 3. Now we've already done this one before. It's going to be 10x squared over 2, which we know is 5x squared, plus 25x. That needs to be evaluated at 0 and 2. And from that, we are going to subtract 18. So let's go ahead and look at that. If I was smart, I would have left that in y1, but I didn't. So we have x raised to the third divided by 3 minus 5x squared plus 25x. And if we evaluate that at 2, we get 32.67. And if we evaluate that at 0, we get 0. Okay, and from that we want to subtract 18. So we get 32.67. That is the area under the curve. We are subtracting out the rectangle, which was 18, and we get 14.67 as our consumer's surplus. Okay, now for producer surplus. So part C, remember, starts with 2 times 9. Q times P must come first, minus the antiderivative from 0 to 2 of x squared plus, what is that one? X plus 3. So we get 18 minus, we have x cubed over 3 plus x squared over 2 plus 3x. Evaluated at 0 and 2. We have 18 minus, now evaluated at 2, that is 10.67. Evaluated at 0, it is 0. So I have 18 minus, let's go ahead and get what's in the parentheses here. So 10.67, which means I should have $7.33 as my producer surplus. Okay, that is the way you're going to see me present that question. So part A will be, let's go back up to the top. It will look just like this, with the part A being your equilibrium point. You're going to use that equilibrium point to find your consumer surplus and your producer surplus. All right, and that is all things that we've already done. Okay, here is another example that you can do. The answers, again, will be in the notes section, but I would like you to try this on your own. If you're having trouble with that, this is a great thing to bring to our Q&A on Monday or Wednesday evenings. Okay, but they do kind of walk you through it here. And then again, you do have the answers in the notes that are posted in the daily notes file. All right, so only one more lesson after this, and then we will be ready for the final exam. And we have survived the semester of the coronavirus.